Om Sahanavavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us. May that one nourish us all both. May we attain vigor together. May we attain efficiency in our works. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So this morning we touched, if you will, on the aspect of freedom, with the idea of freedom, our quest. But now we come to some philosophy, freedom and Vedanta. And so, of course, in our midst is one who is free already, because his name is Vimoksha. So, moksha, freedom, emancipation, liberation. This morning we had a clue about from what? From a kind of perceived understanding that we are bound. And the highest conclusions in what we call the Vedanta philosophy really amounts to the fact that we are not bound. We are already free. We just don't know it. But of course, Vedanta has a whole range of approaches and understandings. And it's commensurate with how we view the world. We start by viewing the world from here, I, or what is assumed to be I, body, something called a mind. A body made from different parts that will eventually get creaky. It was born, it struggled, it'll die. And then a mind that has a jumping characteristic. You never quite know where it's going to be, where it will end up. But it's a reactive mind because it takes all the events and scenes in the environment and somehow internalizes them and formulates a reaction. And every experience, according to the Vedanta and its psychology, has its deposit. Every action, every intention, every thought, every mental movement, every experience settles down in an unconscious area, a kind of library that we bring forward. And it's these things which we call samskaras, these subtle impressions that form our chain. And it's a causal chain. So what are the binding elements that keep us from thinking we are free? These binding elements are causation is one. Causation, a series of sequences, cause and effect, meaning that when we come to the subject of free will, a much debated topic, we can abandon the whole idea of free will since it's bound by this causal law. You can't have free will. Supposing I want to move a chair from one place to another, pre-existing chair must be there. A reason why I should move it should be there. An effect should be there. And then when we trace all the series of causal events, we can probably come back to the origin of the universe. As I said in a talk maybe the other day, if you take a small cake or something like that, well, I think I put it out in a poem, a savory muffin, for example. Don't ask me about the savory part, it's a long story. So any muffin will do. And then you see what are the ingredients, where did they come from, who planted these ingredients in the form of wheat, who harvested them, who packaged them, was the sun necessary, was water necessary, were nutrients necessary, was the earth necessary, was a solar system and a sun necessary, was there a whole universe necessary? You'll find the whole universe made that one thing, single thing. So this causal series is a law. And I will have to refer to the smaller chains of events just to answer before I launch into things, because there's some questions from this morning, I think. Yeah. So rather than you ask the question, I'll see if I can summarize. And then if you still have the question, we can clarify. So I mentioned 5 chains. You can call them local chains, if you will. Our bad experiences. The remedy for that would be faith and gratitude. Our good experiences. We need to dialogue with them, appreciate them, and say goodbye to them. These 2 things all belong in the past. And then the 3rd chain will be to do with the future, anxiety about the future. And the antidote for that will be trust and thanks for all the past, for all the past accomplishments. That's first and second in the past, but in the future, we give thanks in an achieving way. I should explain what I mean by that. You see, in God's area, there's no past, present, or future. Supposing somebody says, oh, I want to pass an exam. Supposing you understand this principle of timelessness and that there is one supreme cosmic mind operating, then you'll say, all right, already granted, thanks. In the past, not in the future. And then the 4th chain will be clinging to the present things. We have to appreciate them and we have to separate them from you. I am not anger. I am not anxiety. I am not food. I am not the body. I am not the mind. I am none of these things. None of this belongs to me. And then the 5th chain is that I think I matter, but I don't. Broadly, we can call this egoism. And 2 remedies were made. Could go back and forward in space and see where do I stand as a kind of imagination exercise, 3,000 years from now, 3,000 years in the past. And then to take account of all the sensations that we feel in the body, internally and externally if you can, and the mind. And the mind has a number of different parts, and these parts engage us in a kind of delusion. Thoughts come through, no doubt, but feelings, emotions come through. And our reactions, if emotionally based, will create huge disturbance in the mind. And it is these series of disturbances that stop us from realizing the truth of our own freedom. So what do we mean by freedom? It means freedom from the so-called laws of nature that involve causation, that involve time, that involve space, that involve all the things that science is currently exploring. When we know that entity that is within us, that we characterize this morning as an observer, what we call self, Atman, when we know it, not know of it, but when we know it, we are free. And freedom also means immortality. Now, nowhere in this whole subject did I mention God. And yet in all the readings, you'll find mention of God, of the Supreme, or repeating the holy name. All of these kinds of things are mentioned. But these come into a category of methods. These are methodologies which enable the realization of our own freedom. And the logic of it would be something like this. You see, if we have a self which is free, that is something inside us which doesn't change, then it means it is free from time and therefore free from causation. And if it is immortal or if it is a constant, it is also immaterial. And if it is immaterial, it means it's not a compound. A compound means some things are made from parts. And anything made from parts that is assembled, firstly, is for the good of another independent other, something that is already free. I mentioned free will is technically an impossibility. Free choice is much better way of expressing it. But behind it is freedom itself, a free area. And this we call the self. We know it has no compound. It cannot be a compound. It cannot be an object. It cannot disintegrate. And so there's no causal law within it. And therefore, for that reason, it's immortal because it has no beginning. It has no struggling middle. It has no end. It is free from time. In fact, all the events that we observe are within this framework of time. And then it must be formless, that is without matter, because it has no space, not confined to any area. Form comes only when what we call force in the old days, or energy and matter collide, as it were, or collaborate. When that happens, some form takes place. And so we know it's formless. And it must also be all-pervading. If it's beyond space and has no spatial confines, then it must be all-pervading. That is, the self is omnipresent. Now see how we characterized God. We say it is omnipresent. We say it is omnipotent. We say it is omniscient. See how many omnis there are, all characterizing the same thing. And so Vedanta, at its highest conclusion, will say what we call this highest principle in the universe and what we call the self is one and the same. And so the highest conclusion, what we call the non-dualistic aspect of Vedanta, will declare, firstly, there is only one existence. This we call technically Brahman. That what we call the self and that is one and the same. The Atman is Brahman. And furthermore, what we call the world is Mithya, is an apparitional formation, and it is dependent on the mind. And so therefore, our conclusion is very obvious. It is the mind we have to deal with if we are to realize this. The mind is everything, every part of our distortion. Looked at it in the right way, when we introduce the fragmentation necessary for space, the series of causal chains that we call time, or within that framework, what we call of that creates a kind of fragmented experience. And if there's only one existence, then what you're looking out on with your eyes, what you're hearing with your ears, what you're experiencing with all the senses in the body is nothing more than fragmented God. This is a peculiar concept in the beginning. And so therefore there is a beginning in the Vedanta. An aspect of the Vedanta is called Dvaita, dualism, starting from where we feel comfortable. Assuming that we are a body and mind, that we are a creation, that we have to form a relationship with an entity that is love. All religions state God is love. On what basis? On the basis that we get something free that is always flowing. If something always is flowing freely, supposing somebody gives you a gift every moment they see you, come on, take this, take this, take this. And then you say, what will you need in return? You know, in human negotiations, there's always a bargaining. I give you something, you have to give me something. So what's the catch? No catch. I'm giving it to you freely, freely pouring myself through all beings. And so the dualist will want to take up the path of devotion. This dualist in Vedanta will want to form a loving relationship with God, and this will lead the devotee to their sense of freedom. So freedom from the dualistic point of view will be forming a relationship and ultimately being one with God in the sense that I'm able to form a heavenly companionship somewhere. But then when we look about the world and see this loving nature as it's poured through all these fragmented beings, hands, eyes, ears, sun, moon, stars, water, when we see the whole rhythm of the universe, will we not also understand that this God is not an entity separate from us, that we don't require a future unity, that somehow there is a connection, somehow there is a deep relationship where we can keep that entity separate and yet still be feeling a oneness, more than just being a relative, being something more intimately connected with the whole universe. And this is a second step, if you will, in the Vedanta. And this is called Vishishtadvaita, qualified non-dualism, as propounded by, say, Ramanuja. But all of this is contingent on one thing, and that is Maya. And we have to understand, what is this Maya? So there's a story, of course, that illustrates this. The great devotee, Narada, he is walking in a desert area with Vishnu. And Lord Vishnu is saying, oh, please, I'm so thirsty, will give me some water. Of course, I will do anything for you. My love is endless. He goes off and looks for water. He finds a housing settlement, like a small village, knocks on the door, and each door doesn't really have anything suitable, knocks on one door, and opening it is a beautiful maiden. And immediately he's captivated by her eyes. These molecules have a magic potency in them. This is a human story, of course, because eyes are merely molecules, but therein lies the delusion. He immediately falls in love, asks for the hand and other parts, presumably in marriage, and off they go and they have children. But one day, to cut a long story short, a great tragedy comes into the area. For 12 years, they live a happy life, but a big storm comes, a big flood comes, and there's nothing he can do. The whole of his family, wife and children, all disappear in the flood. And at that moment, he feels a tap on the shoulder. My child, where's my water? Oh, and his eyes open and he realizes, oh Lord, it is you. What happened? What happened to my wife and children? I was grieving. And so he realized, in answer to his original question, what is Maya? Maya is this illusion that all of these things are real. All of these things, all of these objects, these people, these places, these events are real, and therefore we get attached to them. And of course, they're relatively real. They're real in relation to the sense organs. And so therefore, it's the sense organs which, according to us, forms a part of the psyche, the mind itself. Because this Maya has three evolutionary forces, these three components are there. These components are illustrated in many stories in the Vedanta. But the most impressive one, of course, is the idea of a person in the twilight coming out of the house and seeing in the corner something coiled up. And seeing it coiled up immediately comes to a conclusion. What is Maya? A wrong conclusion. What is this conclusion he comes to? There is a dangerous snake coiled up in the garden. And my memory tells me this must be a cobra and can bite and I can die. Why am I so concerned about that? Because this Maya tells me the body is real and I'm attached to it. And it makes me fearful of death, and therefore gives me no peace of mind and no sense of freedom. He goes indoors and gets a lantern, but we can change it since tomorrow is Guru Purnima. And we find somebody with the light of knowledge coming with him, accompanying him. And that light comes from a component that we call sattva. By the light of this purity and sattva, what we see is not a snake, but a rope coiled up, looking very much like a snake in the darkness of our ignorance. And three components were necessary. A snake had to be projected on the rope, and the rope had to be hidden. The hiding element we call tamas, the projecting element we call rajas, and the enlightening element we call sattva. So we need two types of Maya. We need Vidya Maya and we need Avidya Maya. We need the Maya of ignorance, which helps us to enjoy and sport. If you think this is a tragedy, this life is a tragedy, Vedanta has a different point of view. It says, no, it's just a play of waves. Didn't you notice it? This is all part of Maya. It is this 12-year illusion that you had a wife and children and so on and so forth, and you forgot. What is Maya? Forgetfulness. Forgetfulness of the truth of who you are, that immortal self that religion calls God. And this pristine entity of the self is understood by every single religion and is the basis of every single religion, even though it may be expressed differently. Since we are also commemorating Swami Vivekananda's Mahasamadhi, it is only fitting to catch a few passages on what he wrote on this subject. He says, in connection with every religion, understanding this principle of the self, the idea seems to be the most prominent in Vedanta, and as I have said, it appears to me that every religion holds it. I have yet to know the religion which does not. It is the one universal idea working through all religions. And then he says, take the Bible, for instance. You find there the allegorical statement that the first man, Adam, of course, Adam means man in Hebrew. He was pure, and that afterwards his purity was obliterated by his evil deeds. It is clear from this allegory that the Hebrews thought that the original nature of man was perfect. The impurities that we see, the weaknesses that we feel, are but superimpositions on that nature. So you mark this, superimpositions. I'm resisting to talk about science a little bit, but anyhow, you see, how do we get a misunderstanding in science? You know, the most solid and profound physics is quantum physics. But it's not solid at all, of course, because it's full of uncertainty. But there's an interpretation of this quantum phenomena which says that things are held in superposition, not superimposition, superposition, a state of uncertainty until they're actually observed. And surely this is Maya. And so, and the subsequent history of the Christian religion allows that the Christians believe in the possibility, nay, he says, the certainty of regaining that old state. This is the whole history of the Bible and the New Testament together. And so it is also, he says, with Mohammedans. They also believe in Adam and the purity of Adam and hold that through Muhammad, the way has been opened to regain that lost state. And so too with the Buddhists. They believe in the state called Nirvana, which is beyond this relative world. It is exactly the same as the Brahman of the Vedantists. And the whole system of Buddhism is founded upon the idea of regaining the lost state of Nirvana. So in every system, we find this doctrine present, that we cannot get anything which is not yours already. Whatever you want is yours already in every sense. You're indebted to nobody in this universe. Nobody speaks as beautifully as Swami Vivekananda. You claim your own birthright, as it has been poetically expressed by a great Vedantist in the title of one of his books. And the title of the book, The Attainment of Our Own Empire. That empire is ours. We have lost it, and we have to regain it. The Mayavadan, however, that is the one who follows the teachings of Maya, that Maya is an apparitional construct. These Mayavadans, however, say that the idea of having lost the empire is a hallucination. You never lost it. This is the only difference. So other examples are there. Supposing you're in a desert, you've heard of the phenomenon of a mirage. In the distance, you see that there is a beautiful, because you're thirsty, of course, you might enhance it even more, that there is a beautiful waterfall there with running water, palm trees, date palms, lots of things to eat. And you actually see the water shimmering in the distance. But it is all just an illusion. And so the mind is stunned by these components that we find, which we call Maya. I was once talking to a group, they said, oh, we have to get rid of Maya. Yes, in the long run, we have to transcend Maya. But don't get rid of it, use it. How do we use it? These three gunas or binding elements are called Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. And it gives you the practical formula as to how to access your freedom. Because these components are there, not just in the body, not just in every part of the universe, not forming the universe, they form the whole of the universe, but that includes what we call the psyche, your own mind. And we have the capacity, since we are free from the mind already and able to observe it, we can see how Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas comes through. And it comes through as thought. It comes through as feeling. We can stand back and observe a wave. And we can only do it because these waves come in units of time. First wave comes, and what is there is normally a reaction to what is outside. Let it come. Come if you want, stay if you can, go if you must, is my old formula. Have a cup of tea in the meantime, of course, and go off. That's fine. Wait for the next one. But we cannot judge. What category shall we put this very thought? This wave that came through the mind, is it of the nature of purity? Purity means complete selflessness, no self-interest at all. And coming back to what I said this morning, no element of the future, no element of the past. Something here in the now that is real to me, I capture it now, it's about to leave. Because it's a wave. Like all waves, they have a beginning, they have a peak and a demise. And then there's a hollow and another wave comes. And in the interim, we can exercise this free choice I was talking about. Supposing we decide that 4 of these units, 4 waves that come and go, are in the category of Rajas or Tamas. Well, we need some examples of that. Rajas might say, I want to do some kind of activity, but the bracketed version is for me, see, egocentric, for my own good, selfish. On the basis that body and mind deserves something. Well, it deserves maintenance, there's no doubt. It's like a car in a cartoon. I suppose there's a reason why they call it cartoon. Must be cars there. So a car in a cartoon saying, I demand to be fed. I demand to go to Navan. A car doesn't speak like that because it's insentient. And when we put all our interest, when we put all our investment in something which is insentient, it's a bad investment. We rather put it in something which is completely sentient, something which is active, something that has meaning, something that will give us peace of mind. This peace that passeth the understanding is a Christian version of describing freedom. Noticing this selfish tendency, and it can be of many varieties. It can be full of revenge. It can be full of lust. It can be full of self-possession. It can be full of a desire. Desire will always be a component of it. A desire to be praised, to be thanked, to be loved, to be appreciated. And then the tamas comes and it says, I feel very lazy now. I won't bother. That's easily recognized. Seeing these different categories of thoughts, we can then use the opportunity of a pause. We can use the opportunity of a hollow to insert something consciously, deliberately, usefully in. Make a series of thoughts accompanied by words: strong, true, wise, full, free, truth, beauty, goodness, love, harmony. And you see in the Holy Mother's words that we heard this afternoon, we can put in God's holy name, a mantra of some kind, mantra, protecting thought of some kind. A beautiful example she gave. See, supposing we don't know anything about God, does that stop us from filling out an application? Supposing we are applying for a job and we don't know the person on the other end who's going to receive this and look over it, examine it, and make a decision over it, an executive officer. Does that stop us from putting in the application? Such a clever and beautiful example she gives. So I'm looking at the time here, and it's on its way to 5:05, and we are due to go into the next section, which is meditation. But I'll just leave you with some ideas about this freedom. When you have broken the chain of causation, that is when you have broken some scars, that is when your habit level is so saturated with this sattvic element of truth and beauty and goodness and love, so that it becomes part of your habit level, then the samskaras, the impressions that you have in the unconscious mind, become dull, ineffective, like burnt seeds. Burnt seeds cannot be sown and grow anymore. They are there, no doubt, but they're simply deposited on the bottom. Sri Shankaracharya actually gives that example of a flocculant. So putting in the flocculant of sattva, we are able to take all the other deleterious elements and allow them to nicely coagulate and settle on the bottom. Science again, of course. And then settled on the bottom, the water then becomes clear. And it is in that clarity we're able to see completely. And that seeing is called realization. And that realization is freedom. It doesn't mean we stick there. I haven't even mentioned what a Jivan Mukta looks like. But Jivan Mukta is happy to live in this life and continue. Don't think that the Jivan Mukta is saved from physical pain or hunger, pangs, or any difficulties that normal, so-called normal human beings experience. Not like that, but their mind is free. They have that peace that passes the understanding and an attitude toward life that contributes, not takes. And the example I gave today, this morning, was of a pianist or an instrumentalist learning to play an instrument for the first time and ending up in freedom. I can leave off the play or engage in it as I want, but it is but a play. The practical aspect of all this philosophy, not only to get our freedom, but also to understand that it's a step-by-step process. Tomorrow we'll be talking about the Guru. But the Guru will take this seeker, that we'll call seeker for convenience sake, this play actor, this role player, by the hand and say, come on, my child. No, don't run. No, don't race. You're not in the Olympics. You won't, by a mere thought, jump to the end. Why not take it step by step? And when you can crawl, we'll master the next step, standing, and then we'll master walking, and then we'll master running. And then after that, of course, you can get a car. All right, so we leave that off. So we're now going to meditation. The idea of a retreat is not just to give you, you see, if I was just to give you information like this, it would have no value. We can get information anywhere. You can get information from YouTube channels. You can get information from books. You can get information from your next door neighbor. That has very limited value. You certainly will have to understand the principle first. And once you understand the principle, then you need to catch up with the practice. So the information side of it is the principle, but it has to be not just listened to, it has to be understood. It has to be taken to heart. It has to be fully imbibed. It has to be absorbed until it becomes absolutely natural. and then to practice it. That is to discover that pure self as it is, not as you've heard it is. And the way we hear and the way we understand is from scripture. And all the methods are guided by scripture. What is scripture? Scripture is that direct record of somebody who says, I have seen the truth. I have seen the truth. I have seen the soul. I have seen the reality. Firsthand, I have seen it. And then somebody who's competent to this will say, and you can also see it. But you have to follow some methods. And these methods will require discipline. But the discipline should not be feared, because to discipline requires strength. Suppose saying you want to develop physical strength. You start off with a small thing, possibly picking up some muscular weights. And then you go on a little bit further. You increase the weight, Maybe daily you increase the weight. The original weight then becomes as nothing. And you develop your strength. We require strength, physical. We require emotional strength. We require intellectual strength. We require philosophical strength. That means we require a formula that can be used. So what is the practical application of the Vedanta? And I have to say, we are also celebrating 2 years of being inaugurated here and occupying these presence, for 2.5 years actually, occupying the presence. But you see, our first meeting was held in a room upstairs, and a curious question was asked. What is Vedanta? Knowing that we have a society called Era Vedanta Society, asked the question, what is Vedanta? And the curious thing even more was it came from a Hindu. You don't know what Vedanta is? Vedanta is the philosophy of Hinduism, without which Hinduism doesn't work. The machine which we call popularly Hinduism doesn't work without this profound experience. And scripture is a telling of this direct experience and a manual of the method to use. But we first have to understand, to be free, what are we dealing with? We're dealing with Maya. Maya has these 3 components. We have to take advantage of the threefold nature of Maya to release us. We have to take up the revealing aspect of it. And we have to do it with great diligence, with great love, with great yearning. Yearning is the key component. When we take the non-dualistic formula, how we get there, 4 things are required. Discernment. We have to make a distinction between what is enduring and what is not. And then we have to have a sense of detachment. Detachment does not mean staying aloof. Detachment means I have seen the things that I have discriminated, and automatically I have no taste for the things which are not soundly real. And then I have to have a whole discipline. We call this the 6 treasures. They include such virtues as forbearance, concentration, purity of mind, all disciplinary measures. And they are all functioning as purifying the mind, polishing the mind. And then we have to have yearning, but that is the most important thing, even though we've put it last. It is this yearning. Without yearning, you won't have anything. So I began the series this morning by emphasizing the quest for yearning. Whether you know it or not, you have a thirst for freedom. You have a thirst for freedom. And every action of yours is a struggle to get it. If you change the direction, reform the habit level, then the freedom will be access to you. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be of all.